十鼓呢，这次邀请到我们加拿大的驻村艺术家 Robin Minard 来到这边呢，来跟我们做一个空间的一个创作。最主要呢是他将他的作品以人造及大自然做一个结合。那希望大家来到这边呢，可以透过机器里面的声音，以及我们大自然可以听到水声、风声，以及虫鸣、鸟叫声，不一样的一个展现哦。可以听听看机器的，还有现场的哦。谢谢。我们这个作品呢，有我们现场的以及我们人造的一个创作呢，一起在这里做结合。谢谢，也期待大家能莅临来我们十鼓桥糖文创园区，非常好玩哦。好，谢谢大家。那这边绝对会让您有不一样的一个室外的一个活动空间，以及我们的一个有享受艺术跟自然的结合，请不要忘记来到十鼓桥糖文创园区。
I only can say 谢谢 und 好吃 and 好喝。赞 is very good. 棒。赞。Taiwanese 赞 great. 赞。让我们介绍看一下。
现在在我右手边的这一位是来自加拿大的 Robin Minard， 那他本身是一位声音艺术家。那这次我们十鼓桥糖文创园区特别邀请他来这边为我们做一个装置艺术。
他本身是在加拿大，对不对？
他目前长期定居在德国工作，然后他老婆也是德国人。
I was very happy to come to Taiwan. And was very inspired by the country and the people and the nature. And I made the installation. I was very inspired by the insects and the frogs here. They all sound so lovely.
How do you think about the park?
This is a great park, and I think the initiative, the idea to invite artists to present new art ideas in this context, in this natural context, is very good idea.
他觉得这个园区是相当自然，然后我们利用这个废弃空间来活化这个园区，是相当好的一个概念。
It's a there's a lot of interesting things in the park with the old sugar factory, and which I really hope that they'll preserve this factory for a long time, so people can see the heritage of the sugar factory. The drummers are the percussion is very interesting because it's mixing new compositions with old Taiwanese drumming culture, I think, and it's a very nice environment with the park. I think it would be nice if they could keep inviting artists to come to Ten Drum to do new art projects, to help people understand the way art is going today. My project is about listening. It's about not listening in the way we listen to music, but listening in the way we listen to nature. And when you start listening to the installation, you start listening to the frogs and the insects. And one woman told me, when I was setting up the installation, it's nice. I've been listening to my smartphone. We only listen to telephones now. And it's nice to hear something that's in the space and part of nature. So that's what it's about. It's about learning to listen. Because we're learning more and more not to listen. We're putting on earphones and taking music with us, but we forget to listen to the environment. So when you start to listen to the installation, I hope people will start to listen to the environment too. There are here 140 small loudspeakers. Do you want to say?
这边有140个压电式的扬声器。
And these small loudspeakers can only make very simple sounds. They are not a hi-fi loudspeaker like this one. They only do very simple sounds.
就这些压电式扬声器呢，它只能发出非常简单的声音，不像我们一般的喇叭，它可以发出比较复杂的声音。
But in the same way that insects only make very tiny, simple sounds, when we make a lot of small, tiny sounds, we can make a very complex space out of the small sounds.
就它利用昆虫，它只能发出相当微弱的声音，它利用这些非常微弱的声音来呈现出一个比较复杂的一个组合。
So the installation is also about other ways to use loudspeakers, other ways to use technology to make interesting space.
就是他的作品呢，他是利用人工的东西跟这个大自然融合为一体。
If I had asked my grandmother when she was a young girl if she'd listened to music from loudspeakers, she would say, "What's a loudspeaker?" This has only happened in the last 100 years we have loudspeakers. And now we have loudspeakers everywhere. And it's important to understand what we do with loudspeakers and understand how to work with them because they become part of our space.
就说在他奶奶那个年代呢，如果跟他说喇叭的话，他不晓得喇叭是什么声音。不过在现在这个年代，到处都是喇叭。那我们如何利用这些喇叭，也就是扬声器呢，来制造出一个营造声音的空间
So the installation is about technology, about mixing technology with nature, that's why it looks like this, and about listening.
就是他的作品主要的诉求就是将他的东西跟自然融合在一起。你可以听到这边有声音，然后可能声音来自四面八方，有可能一只鸟就飞过来了，可能后面蛙鸣的声音，他把这些人造的声音跟大自然的声音 mix 在一起，那主要让我们学会去聆听这个大自然。
So it invites people to listen, and once they start listening, maybe they won't stop. And then when they are in nature, they will think of the installation and they'll start listening, and then things may change.
就如果人们开始学会聆听之后呢，可能他们就不会停止了。那由学会聆听这件事情，有可能有一些这世上有一些事情就可能慢慢的开始在改变了。所以它的声音，它也就不取用来自自然的声音，对，就人造归人造，自然归自然。
So it sounds like water, but if you listen very closely, it's not really water.
就可能声音听起来很像水，不过你仔细听的话，它其实就不是水声。
It tries to mix up the way you perceive things so that you become aware of them. You see?
就是如果你对这声音有疑虑的话呢，你就会开始慢慢的越来越仔细的去聆听这种声音，这样子。
The sounds come from? Is it what kind of equipment you use to
Okay. I use a computer to make the sounds. I use a lot of noise, some organic sounds, but they're processed on the computer. And the computer produces them so these little insect sounds, they're never quite the same. They're always very different. It's always changing the height of them and the size of them, so it's always making different movements on the space. I have two different layers of sound. One is this water and wind sound, and the other are the little sounds that move on the installation. And the computer is controlling all these movements and the way the sounds mix. And I record it from the computer, and it's a 45-minute loop that repeats after 45 minutes. They're supposed to be sounds that remind you of nature. They're not natural sounds, but they remind you of nature, but at the same time, like these loudspeakers are technical with cable, the sounds are also technical sounds somehow. It's a mixing.
So each one of them like sounds, the same.
All of the, well, no, there's eight different channels of sound. There's channels that move and channels that do the background. But the interesting thing about these speakers is they're not very good. So each one sounds a little bit different. So it makes very complex kind of sounds.
Sounds interesting.
And it's called part of the name is silent music. Silent music. So it's very quiet. It's not, you don't have to listen to it here. If you walk through the space, some people don't notice it, and some people do notice it. So I'm also very thinking a lot about the way we listen. We listen to music, we sit down and listen concentrated and listen to what it's about. And when we listen to nature, we don't need to listen to it, or we can sit and listen to it for a long time. And I copy this kind of structure. You don't have to listen to it, but if you want to listen, there's a lot to listen to, you know? So it's very quiet, and it becomes a part of the space. I was very inspired by the frogs. There's a lot of frogs, you hear some over there, yeah? And they're always calling each other, and there's a lot of insects at night. And especially after the typhoon, there was a lot going on here. And I copied this with the installation a bit. And at night, when you're in the evening, early evening, you hear the installation and you hear the frogs and the insects. So everything opens up, and it becomes my installation becomes a part of a much bigger space. And people listen to the installation, and you hear the frogs, and then you hear an insect, and you hear the installation. So it's about this whole space, not just about this. It's about everything. Yeah.
Normally, how do people think about your installation?
Normally, people react to it very well, because they associate it with an object that's making sound, and if you make this kind of sound on that kind of speaker, it's very strange. You wonder what's happening. But if you make it here on this kind of speaker, then it becomes part of this object. And because it's very, very quiet and makes people listen, they begin to listen, and they normally like the installation.
Because in Taiwan they are always very noisy here.
Oh yeah. So maybe sometime they will have to be quiet to listen and listen. That's what it's about, to be quiet and listen. To learn to listen again. Like I said, we're learning more and more not to listen. We're always learning how to make spaces quiet and to put headphones on to listen to music and watching our iPhones. And this piece is about changing that, about suddenly, oh, there's something interesting going on, so I begin to listen. You know? It's inviting people to listen. And when you listen, you are quiet.
And now you're forced to sleep.
For sleep? Yeah. It's good for sleep, yeah. That's the test. That's the test. I do that test sometimes. I test like that. Sometimes I put the installation on and see if I can sleep. And then it's working.
Do all the speakers have sound, or only some
All the
of
speakers.
them? All speakers.
Yeah. Space like we do on this. These kind of speakers are about well, they also are about reproducing sounds.
Oh, yeah.
And this is about making a space, making sound, like little insects, you know.
这边帮我们做一个十鼓文创园区呢，这次为了要活化我们的一个园区的一个景观，我们特别邀请到我们来自加拿大的一个很棒的 Robin Minard 来到现场呢，来到这边来帮我们做艺术驻村的一个计划。那我们这个加拿大的这个 Robin Minard 呢，他是来自加拿大的魁北克麦吉尔大学以及蒙特楼音乐学院以及巴黎的第8大学学习作者及电子原声的一个音乐创作。那他这次呢，我们特别邀请他来现场来跟大家分享他的作品，让我们掌声来欢迎他。
So now I first I should say thank you to Ten Drum for inviting me here. I would like to say first thank you to Ten Drum for inviting me to come all the way. I live in Germany. I'm Canadian, but I live in Germany. To come all the way here and do an art piece here. I think the plan is to continue inviting artists, because it said the first residency for artists at Ten Drum. So I was invited to do an installation piece here, which I've been doing this kind of work for about 30 years now. And I decided to do it on this nice wall here that's kind of inside all this plant area. So when you walk into the space, the installation is mixed with the plants that you see. So you have a perception of something very organic in the space. When you approach it though, you see that it's loudspeakers and cable. So it mixes our perception about what is organic and what is technical. That's something that is very interesting today because sometimes we don't know if plants are more scientific than they are organic. We have this kind of strange situation now with the perception of organic and technical things anyway. The second thing is the way we listen to sound. 10 Drum has some excellent percussion people playing drum music here, where people sit and listen to concerts. That's one kind of listening, where we listen to people playing a concert and we're very quiet and listen. Another kind of listening is listening in nature. So we don't concentrate it on it. We don't have to listen when we go out. We can be talking to somebody and not notice anything, or we can sit and listen for hours to nature. And after the typhoons here, I sat out here by the frog pond and was always listening to the frogs. And there's many kinds of different frogs, and especially after the typhoon, they were really giving concerts. And a lot of bugs. And I'm really interested in this kind of listening as well. So I made a new part to my installation with these bug sounds in them that are always quite different kinds of sounds coming and going. And this is the second thing that the installation does, is to invites you to listen in a very different way. When I was setting it up, a woman came and said, "Oh, that's nice. I'm always listening to my telephone, and now somebody's doing something that I can listen to in the space." So, can everybody hear me? I think it's okay. The woman came and said, "I'm always listening to my telephone and listening to music and listening to other people, and we have this way of we listen on headphones and we listen to our telephones, and we are always listening to loudspeakers. I wanted to make a piece that invites us to listen in a different way, in the way we should be listening to nature. So what happens with the installation in the evening is also interesting, because the frogs are singing and the bugs are calling, and the installation is making the same kind of sound. So people begin to, I hope, people begin to listen not to the installation but to everything around. So it invites people to listen in a different kind of way, to be quiet and listen. But if they just walk through, it's all right. They don't have to listen to it. So it's about, I copy the structure in nature about this kind of listening in this piece. So the installation is a bit about technology. It's about the way we perceive technology and speakers and cables. And it's about the ways in which we listen, and hopefully we can change the ways in which we listen. These little speakers are very different than this big speaker over here. This big speaker is made to reproduce sounds that we record, or reproduce the sound of my voice so you can hear it louder. And these little speakers don't do very much. It's like insects. They make very small, tiny, simple little sounds. But you know, if you have 1,000 little insects in a space, they make a really complex, rich kind of sound space. And so these small speakers, they don't do very much in the way of reproducing the sound of my voice. It would sound terrible here. But you can make a very complex kind of sound environment with these tiny speakers, which you can't do with a normal loudspeaker. So it's also about ways of using technology to do different things than just to reproduce sound. The other thing I mentioned was that when I would have asked my grandmother when she was a little girl if she'd listened to things on loudspeakers, she would have said, "What's a loudspeaker?" They didn't have them 75 years ago. There was no loudspeaker. In the last century, we've begun to reproduce everything over loudspeakers. When we want music, we put it on loudspeakers. If we want to talk to somebody, we listen over a loudspeaker. This didn't exist before. If we wanted to listen, we had to organize musicians, and we had to get music stands, we had to get chairs, and we had to bake cookies to get people to come, and we had to travel to go listen. And now we hear loudspeakers everywhere. And my work is trying to change the way we use loudspeakers, to make them part of the space, and not to make us listen to music all the time. It's about using them to make organic space. So I'm glad that 10 Drum has this initiative to to make new projects, and I hope that it will continue on to inviting artists to do projects here and make this whole space full of different kinds of artwork and different ways of. The one thing art can do is make us think of things differently. So different ways of making us hear things and see things. You want to translate all of that?
好，那我们谢谢 Robin Minard 对他作品的介绍。那我简单来解释一下。就 Robin Minard 他从事这个声音装置艺术已经大概30多年了。那他对于作品的一个概念是，他希望把人工的东西跟大自然的东西结合在一起。所以你可以看到它这面墙，它是由许多压电式的扬声器，就是这些小型的扬声器跟电线组合而成。那它作为一个声音装置艺术呢，它在视觉上它也有做一个安排，就是它把它安排成像是自然界的有机植物体，然后它在攀爬在一面墙上。那我们后面呢，你就可以看到，这就是一片大自然。那大自然的，我们会有听到蛙叫或者是虫鸣鸟叫，可能等一下那边会飞来一只鸟，那边有鸟叫的声音，就整个声音环绕在这一个空间里面。那因为现代人啊，就是太依赖智慧型手机，那我们现在只懂得拿着一台智慧型手机在聆听，那已经忘记去聆听这个大自然的声音。那他就是希望让我们再回归以前的状态，让每个人再回去学会聆听。那在学会聆听的这个过程当中，可能这世界上就有一些事情会慢慢的再去改变。那像他提到他奶奶在还是个小女生的时候，你跟她说，扩音器，她会问你说，扩音器是什么东西？不过在现在这个年代呢，我们到处都已经是扩音器了。像我们现在大家都喜欢用我刚才讲的智慧型手机或是 iPad 来听音乐，你可能整天都在听音乐，忘了把你的耳机拿下来听听周遭的声音，来听听这个空间里面到底有什么声音值得我们去注意。然后他也希望呢，我们十鼓呢，可以在往后的每年都请艺术家来这边进驻，然后创作一个新的作品。那些艺术家的作品能够充满这整个园区。
And thank you very much to. We had a wonderful time in Taiwan. The people are so friendly, and we love everything here. So I'm very happy to leave this with people in Taiwan.
那他对于这次来台湾感到非常的高兴，因为他觉得台湾人都对他们非常的友善，然后他们也是昨天才刚刚去台湾玩的东半部，还有去了绿岛，才刚刚玩回来而已。那他觉得台湾是个相当漂亮的国家。
你在全世界有多少的产品？
他在世界有几个地方展示？
I do a lot of installations that are not permanent. I've done I've been doing installations for 30 years, so maybe I have to multiply that by. So maybe I've done about 700 installations, but I have about 6 that are permanent installations. 6 that are permanent.
就他在这30年内大概已经做了70个作品，不过只有60个作品是一直保持着常态性的在展览，那其他作品它只是暂时性的。
And there's a book at the entrance if they want to look at other kinds of projects.
就刚刚我们在进来的那个桌子上面有一本是他的作品书，如果大家有兴趣的话，等一下可以去参与一下。
And I also do a lot of radio projects. And in January there'll be a radio project about the Arctic. Arctic.
录音的一些作品，关于建筑，idea 是概念是来自于建筑的东西。
Sorry, one question. The voice of this kind of birds, like kind of wings, is all from Taiwan or it's from
And they're also changed. They're modified.
Got it. Thank you.
那我们现场的朋友有问题吗
？Well, it's your installation can help the people of Taiwan president to hear the people's I just want to know is that the installation will have the politician to hear people's
voice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, when we start to listen and start to be aware of our environment, then things change. And I think that's something, like just the way we interact with our environment. And we're not always just doing things, but we're thinking about listening and we're thinking about the environment. Then things change. Things change politically as well, because we start to react differently. So maybe it's political too. Maybe it's if it helps people listen, then it has to be good.
Should we invite them to
To come here, yeah. Invite them to come here and learn to listen. Come and learn to listen. And then go and listen to the great percussionists in Tendra too. It's a really great group. Yeah.
还有其他问题吗
Sorry, one more question. But I would like to know that why your production has lost now, why the names of your article is like the
Silent music?
Yeah, why?
Why? Because it's about, again, it's called silent music because it's about listening. So we have a way to listen to music, but we don't have a way to listen to silence. And I want to kind of mix this way of our attentive listening. We listen to music attentively. We sit quietly and listen to it. But we don't sit quietly and listen to music. So I want to mix this way of listening with a listening to nature. So it's about listening to silence in the way we listen to music. So I call it silent music.
Thank you.
那么现场朋友还有没有其他问题？好，那我们再次谢谢我们 Robin 为他带来介绍他的作品，那我们再为他掌声鼓励一下。
Nature voice.
He asked about listening to the installation, and it's rather difficult right now. If there's a lot of noise in the space, then you don't hear it very well. You have to come up here to listen to it now. When the space is empty or in the evening, you can hear it from way back there. I hear it from way back there. So when there's a lot of people in the space, you don't hear it because it's very quiet. And that doesn't bother me if people don't hear it right away. If there's a lot of people, because I wouldn't turn nature up just to be heard as well. So if it's very noisy, you don't hear it. If it's quiet here and people listen, then it's easy to listen to.
You said what kind of sound from the computer?
I use some natural sounds, but a lot of synthetic sounds, noise and little water sounding sounds. But if you listen very closely, they're synthetic. Water doesn't do this kind of loop like this, like this. So it's the same thing as the speakers, really. I'm trying to make sounds that sound natural, but when you come close and listen, you start to notice that they're not. It's the same thing with this. From far away, it looks like it's natural, but when you get close, you notice it's only technical, loudspeakers and cable. And the sounds, if you listen very closely, you notice they're not natural sounds. So it's the same kind of perception. And like I said, I think when you mix up our perception, so we don't know if it's natural, we don't know if it's natural or technical, and we don't know if the sounds are, if we recognize them or not, it kind of disturbs us. And this disturbance makes us aware of things. I think if it was just like nature, we wouldn't really notice it as much. It tries to disturb our perception, so we notice it.
So you just try to catch the people?
Yes.
Attention?
Yes. But quietly catch it, not
Just all
quietly.
do you need a sign
Well, we do have a sign here to explain it. Under here. It will be here. There's a sign. I don't think it needs a sign, but I think it's nice in context of the cultural park to have a sign about what it's about. I would have no problem with it if there was no sign, because for me it's something you just happen to come across and you can wonder what it is. That's fine. It's not, this is also something about the installations, that they're not, a lot of time musicians and artists want to be the center of attraction. So this is my piece, but I'm not so interested. I want people through the installation to listen to the environment. So it's people can just come across it and wonder what it is and begin to listen. And it's not aggressive in any way, it's very quiet.
So your installation is trying to mix your silent music with the nature.
With the environment.
Yeah.
And in the evening it does mix. There's a lot of insects and frogs, and the installation mixes perfectly with it.
Okay, it's really nice installation.
Thank you. 谢谢。
它这个产品的名称叫什么？有没有讲？让我们讲。
What is the name of your installation?
It's called silent music. 10-drum silent music. Yeah. Because we have a way of listening to music, which is concentrated, and we sit and listen to music. But we don't have a way to listen to silence, which I'm trying to mix the way we listen to music and trying to transport that to the way we listen to silence in nature. So I call it, it's actually listening to silence in a musical way. So it's called silent music. For spatial. A lot of things happen here because of the glass. There's a lot of reflections here. It's a very complex sound compared to this one. It's very small, and very tiny sound, but it's very complex because of so many speakers and because of reflections. And,
I see, yeah.
No hi-fi. It's lo-fi.
Okay.
But it's a lo-fi that's more complex.
Separated on the voice.
它接近自然。